Hello viewers, I'd like to welcome you to our special launch edition of Perspectives. My name is Adedoyin and I'll be your host for today. Today we'll be talking about a very central, pivotal issue really, in the quest of African economies to achieve development and facilitate engagement with the rest of the world. You would agree with me that in an increasingly global economy, the ability to make electronic payments in a large way facilitates trade and commerce. The ability to make those payments securely and make them successfully. So to discuss this very topical issue with me today, we have an expert, someone who is very pivotal, whose position is very pivotal in the financial ecosystem in Nigeria. My guest today to discuss the role of the Nigerian InterBank Settlement System in the financial ecosystem in Nigeria is Mr. Ade Shonubi. You're so welcome, Ade.
The pleasure is mine.
Thank you very much for finding time to join us out of your very busy schedule on this program. Ade Shonubi is currently the MD of Nigerian InterBank Settlement System and is very instrumental to fashioning the emerging e-payment landscape in Nigeria today. Before he assumed this position, he has held several executive management positions in banks and non-bank financial institutions, spanning over 22 years. His experience spans organizations such as Union Bank, Citibank, FCMB, EcoBank, and several others. So I'd welcome you again to this program, Ade. And I'll start by asking a question that may seem fairly obvious, but I want you to start by telling us, really, what is the role that NIBSS plays in the Nigerian and by extension the African economy today?
Okay, thank you very much. We're actually 20 years old this year, and it shows that we've been around for a while. What we are less known for is the fact that when we started writing checks, processing checks, 20 years ago, the banks handed it over to NIBSS, which is why it was set up. So we're the clearing house for the country's checks, the days when we had 20 days up-country checks. And we've handled that up until today, where we have next day value for all the checks across. So the fundamental role we have played has been one of the clearing house for the country. And on the back of the clearing house, we're now the central switch and the central point where most of the electronic payments get connected to before they are passed on to the banks or whoever is responsible. So somehow we sit in the center of the payment space in Nigeria, and we've used that with some of our colleagues in the Francophone countries and Ghana in trying to build a West African standard payment infrastructure.
Oh, interesting. West African.
Yes, West Africa.
Perhaps you tell us a bit more about that.
You'll find out that whenever you use a card, and I'd like to use a debit card as a typical example, it's common for us to go to Europe or the Americas and you take a Nigerian card, and these days you can use it anywhere.
Yes.
Now, if you go across the border through semi-border into Benin Republic and you use that card, the transaction is considered international. So it actually goes all the way to Europe and then comes down, and you get charged whatever you get charged for an international transaction.
Okay.
Now, those charges are convenient for you and a bit difficult for me, but I can manage them. But when we now start talking about the transactions you have at the border, they tend to involve low-value transactions for the kind of people that are there. You hear people talk about financial inclusion, traders, small traders. It's not convenient for them. The 100 naira they have to pay is quite a bit for them. So what we've decided to do is, rather than these transactions going somewhere else and then coming, why can't a transaction in Benin Republic be sent straight to Nigeria if it's a Nigerian customer? And if that's the case, we've cut out a significant leg, so it should be cheaper. So that was the thinking behind it, that if within West Africa we can create a payment network, the transactions should be faster and they should be cheaper. And therefore we should be able to get a lot more people to imbibe it, especially for cross-border trade. So that's the driving force.
That's interesting, very interesting. And I think that's one real example of how NIBSS affects the average man on the street. You know, so if you're a citizen, an African national, if you're a professional, if you're a trader, if you're an institutional organization, what other ways does NIBSS actually affect the man out there on the street?
Well, we all take it for granted now that when you write your check, it must be honored, and not only that, it's honored the next day. This was something we worked hard at with the central bank to put both the infrastructure, which is the easiest, and then the rules around it so that the banks would act on time, and if something failed on time, they'll report back. So we've been quite helpful in making sure the simplest of electronic payment, which is the check, actually gets to work efficiently. Now, the other role which we play, which is not very obvious, is if you go to any shop and you need to use your card on a point-of-sale device, it has to come to us. The reason why that was put in place was previously you would go into a shop and you have like 20 different terminals.
Yes.
Only this terminal will accept this type of card and that one. And we felt it was quite expensive for merchants to invest in 4 or 5 terminals. Why can't you have one terminal accept all cards? To allow that to happen, the central switch was created that they must all talk to us. Okay. So it doesn't matter which card you use in the shop, you know that it will be accepted. If it's not accepted, there's a central point that can then ensure that whatever problems come up are resolved. And now that we're moving out of Lagos into Abuja, into 6 different other states, it makes that role even more pivotal. Because we've set up a helpline, a zero, in other climes, a toll-free number, one of the first, so that people can call from anywhere. It won't cost them to have their problems resolved. So that's another bit of the space that we play in. A small one, small for now, but we believe that's the future, is also our role in mobile payments. We have 20 licensed mobile money operators who are again required to connect to NIBSS. The reason why that is again for interoperability. So now, whether you own a bank account or you own a mobile wallet, it doesn't matter. You can move money from your bank account to a mobile wallet, from a mobile wallet to a mobile wallet, and from a mobile wallet to the bank. So you're not disadvantaged because you have a mobile wallet. Okay. To make it easy and to encourage that industry, the role of connecting the mobile wallets to banks is done by NIBSS for ₦1. And it's a notional amount, so they can appreciate there's some value there. So for all intents and purposes, we do it for free to encourage transactions to be moved so that you don't feel, I must go with this man, and unfortunately, once I'm going with this mobile wallet, I can't use my mobile wallet to do other things. That is restricted to that environment alone. So that is another role that we play that's there.
Interesting. I mean, you're talking about facilitating interoperability amongst different channels, and I think that really speaks to the drive for the cashless Nigeria, so to speak, which NIBSS is at the forefront of. We're told from publicly available information that we're going up, transaction volumes are going up about 50% or around that. So can you tell us a bit about the success, the challenges around the Cashless Nigeria initiative today?
The only challenge we have, and the irony of the challenge of technology, is people. So the biggest challenge we've had are people. You're asking people to change habits, behaviors, and a way of life they've been used to. You're asking people who get about 20% of their take-home from the inefficiencies of the payment system. And you're telling them to willingly imbibe a payment system that wipes that out. That's the challenge we're facing. And what do I mean by that? We're in an environment where people don't usually tip. Petrol stations are a typical example. So you go in and you buy a full tank, 9,523 naira. Chances are you're going to pay 9,050, rounding up. So that difference of 27 naira is part of the guy's take-home pay. Electronic means will make it exact. So we're finding a lot of reluctance on the parts of people who are not the owner managers of shops to encourage these devices to work. And that has been our biggest challenge. People talk about telecoms, people talk about cost of getting the equipment there, but it is really the people. It's been a people issue. And education. Now we're working on some kind of reward mechanism so that they're encouraged to make it happen. Those are the ways we think we'll get around it.
Okay, so it's really about managing change.
It is a big change.
Trying to make them understand that there are benefits for them
Yep.
individually as well as obviously collectively.
Yep.
And that's something that NIBSS is at the forefront as well nationally. You didn't mention though some of the challenges that people would typically think about in this, things like data or security. Are those issues that are of concern to NIBSS today?
As of now, we don't think there are issues because we work with international standards. There's hardly anything that's new, and definitely we don't invent them over here. So we ensure that all the necessary security protocols that are required at data level, at transmission level, international certification, we try and make sure those things are in place. So they become the standard which you must achieve before you then come into the space. So we have rules as to who can connect to us, what you can connect to us, how we exchange keys and things like that. So for us it's less of a concern because we see it as more of a process thing, which once you have in place, you meet the requirements, it can flow. Not as much as people who are totally unpredictable.
Okay, so you've taken care of security within NIBSS, but we are still told that the fraud levels are rising just as the adoption of cashless is rising.
Yeah.
How is that, and what are you doing about it, if anything?
I come back to what I said. The increase in fraud is actually a people issue. Also again, because we're finding out that the fraud we've identified occurs in the offices of the parties that connect to us. So let's assume they are banks. So we have someone who's fraudulent in a bank who has colluded because he has certain rights to create a payment, then goes through us. So we're just a channel. We do not. It's not initiated on our platform, and we're now encouraging the banks to start with the most basic. We're asking them to actually, maybe it's not the appropriate word, but investigate the employees. So you're supposed to do lifestyle checks. We found cases of young individuals who've been in the IT department of banks who've committed fraud, and when you go and check him out, he lives in a flat, but you find out he owns a flat. So there are things like that that would have been pointers. We've not really looked at the people and made people realize that if your lifestyle is changing, you'll be called to order. Then, of course, compromise. You should make it as difficult as possible. There have been some processes that have been less than adequate in institutions that have allowed for collusion. You found instances where people maintain the same administrator password that wasn't changed, and is the default. So if you know that kind of environment, you can guess what it will be. Simple things like that. Those are the things that have led largely to fraud so far. And the banks are a bit more aware. When we see those things happening, we tell them. There's also a push for PCI-DSS as a standard within the financial institutions. It's not an end in itself, but a means to an end. So that would also help awareness in the control environment, ensuring some basic things happen. But it's not just the banks, because I think when you start to tighten the center, fraud then moves to the periphery. So you find the banks are connected to us now, but more and more institutions are connecting to the bank so they can have straight-through processing, so it can be efficient. I'm not sure the controls are as tight as you move to them. So corporations are connecting directly to the banks for payments, for collections. I think the fraud is going to move there. So again, the bank will be a conduit. You get a file from your customer that says pay so much to this person, and then 3 weeks later they tell you, sorry, we didn't originate the file. But it came through the channels that have been secure. So we're finding the fraud is moving out. The banks are tightening, it's not moving out. And that's what's going to happen.
This is interesting. I mean, you're still going back to people, facilitated by the loopholes in the process and the controls and in technology. But the question then will be, when we talk about the African perspective, are we in Africa, are we different from the rest of the world?
Yes.
Tell us why you think so.
Even within Africa, we're different. In Southern Africa, they're a totally different breed. And why I use the word a totally different breed is, there are things they've taken for granted, which for us, we're just starting. I mean, everybody talks about the M-Pesa model. how successful it is, not even just what's past tense, how everybody has accepted. For you to accept a payment channel, you need to trust it. It means they trust the channel. And for it to grow, at the inception, a significant number of people trusted the channel. We don't trust the channels that we have here. So we have a different mindset. And when you bring some of those solutions that assume an environment where they have succeeded, which is different from us, we then have that challenge. So I can't see an M-Pesa succeeding here, because my telephone or my aunt in the village will accept I can recharge a phone for her remotely. But until someone else has tried to make payments electronically with the phone and is successful, she's unlikely to accept. Even if I were to send her money on a mobile wallet, the first thing she will do is convert it to cash. And after a long period of time and everybody has told her it's safe, she will then accept. So it's a long cycle. And I think the learning curve for us is a bit more, a bit longer. So whatever we're trying to do, we need to have the staying power. The problem is sometimes we expect it to happen in a year, it doesn't happen. We get tired, and rather than continue with it and see it through, we stop and then start something new. So that's why I say we're a slightly different set of people. And it's not just Nigerians. I think those of us in West Africa are slightly different. We're a bit different from the others.
So there is a difference between West Africans and the rest of Africa. I mean, clearly we know that South Africa and East Africa are sort of further ahead of us in this whole e-payments development. And you're saying to us that it's because we're different people.
We are different people. Even North Africa is ahead of us on the e-payment space. But the beauty is we can leapfrog some of the things they're doing. In North Africa, the predominant way of payment is still cards and point-of-sale devices. So they have some of the highest concentration of point-of-sale devices, POS devices that you would have. They don't have that much in terms of the mobile space, so they're not as active. In my view, and this is my personal view, this does not represent the view of the institution. The POS is a temporary step to another level, which will be the telephone in some form, shape, or manner. Whether it's a mobile wallet, which is what all these people are singing now, your mobile account, your mobile, or telephone banking, which is using the telephone to access a formal account in an institution. Any which way, the convenience of the phone is what we will be using to make and to receive. We have that opportunity, so we don't have to crawl through. We have that opportunity now to make it happen. I'm trying to pick my words, so I'll decide whether it is I'm letting out some secret or not.
Let them out, let them out. Our viewers want to hear your secrets.
We were one of the first countries in the world where you could make and receive payment instantly and be able to utilize the value. So you could transfer money to someone, it hits their account the moment you're sending it, and then you can use it. We and our colleagues in Ghana are now putting something in place so that you can instantly make a payment in Ghana from Nigeria. So someone is in Ghana and they need money, you sit down in front, immediately it's gone. The same way it happens to Nigerian accounts, it will happen in Ghana. We started discussions again with the Francophone countries to create that payment network so that in an environment, it doesn't matter where you are, how you want to pay, you can get certain values that are still alien in other places. The UK has only started instant pay. It's very recent. We've been doing it for like 3 years. And for us, the main thing again is the phone. So instantly, any mobile wallet or phone anywhere in West Africa can send or receive value instantly.
Instantly, interesting. So you see your role then not constrained by a Nigerian, being a Nigerian organization, because you're talking about relationships with Ghana, with Francophone countries, so I see a lot of integration with the African ecosystem, and you talked about the West African initiative. So how exactly do you see all of this evolving? What is the future for electronic payments in Africa? How is that whole financial landscape, how do you see it evolving, and what role is NIBSS playing in that?
The biggest limitation for all what we're saying is not the technological aspect, how do you connect, how do you exchange information, is actually the mundane bit, which is how you settle. Because at the end of the day, money needs to move from one institution to another one. And when you're moving money across borders, you now need to worry about the various countries, their rules, and their central banks. We have ECOWAS, and that's why we started looking at West Africa first. For the last 10 years, ECOWAS has been trying to resolve the issue of a single currency. They've not done it. I don't see it happening in the next 3 years. So we would have, between us and Ghana, we're having to resolve issues at a bilateral level. Then we'll have to go to the Francophones. Whereas if ECOWAS had done their bit, there would have been a uniform way for settlement. So the bank in Ghana that's effecting a payment on my behalf from Nigeria knows how Naira somehow will be converted to Ghanaian cedis. So we have some mechanisms that are being used now, using like intermediate currencies. But it's the settlement that remains the problem because it's highly regulated in our environment. We're going with international standards, ISO standards and co, slightly different variants for each country, but we have more or less agreed on the ISO standards we'll follow. So it should make it easier to exchange information amongst ourselves. But that settlement, one central bank says no, my rules are this, the other one says yes, but under this condition. So we're having to find the lowest common denominator in terms of the values that you can send out, the types of transactions you can send out, and then make that the bottom that we start with, so that all transactions can flow freely, while we try and convince everybody to have a common view on the kind of transactions we can run through.
And then start to raise the bars.
And then we raise the bar.
So do you see cashless Africa? When?
First is cash will remain with us forever. Second, cashless means when we're successful, 60% of transactions will be non-cash.
60%?
60, yes, will be non-cash. For me, that's a measure of success. And in terms of transaction count, not value, because you only need one big government transaction of billions, and then you'll say 90% of your values are cashless. So it has to be transaction count. It is difficult to win the trust. It is very, very difficult. If we can get to 60%, I think we've succeeded. But we never know what might happen. We shouldn't be optimists. In 5 years, if we can achieve 50% in West Africa electronic transactions, we've done a very good job.
Absolutely. Okay, I think that's probably all that we have time for now. My guest today has been Ade Shonubi. I'd like to thank you once again, Ade, for coming on the program and for sharing with us your very insightful perspective on the evolving e-payments landscape in Africa. So I'd like to thank you for listening, for being with us. God bless you, and see you again next time.